Hi everyone, and I wanted to quickly make a separate video to capture some of the information that I looked up regarding the upcoming transit at the end of July, early August, which looks pretty difficult to me, one of the more difficult times of the year, as I mentioned in another video where I talked about global trends for 2022. And specifically what we will have, and again, it will be precise right around the 1st of August, but plus minus few days, even several weeks. So perhaps even from like July 25th through August 13th is where the time may be kind of the more difficult. And we will have basically conjunction between Mars, Uranus, and the North Node. And those three will be then squared by Saturn. And the conjunction between Moon node, Uranus, and Mars is actually going to be quite precise right on the 1st of August. At the same time, there will be a square to Saturn within a few degrees. And even just taking one of those combinations like Mars with Uranus is basically something that leads to manifest as accidents, especially accidents involving fast-moving vehicles and flying objects, or some sudden attacks, sudden power outages. And when you have, of course, Uranus and Saturn squaring each other, that's definitely energy that's, again, even more problematic, even more serious. It could relate to things like major structural damage, so like an earthquake, aircraft crash. Certainly tends to coincide with down movement for cryptocurrencies and even for the markets in general. Any of the tense Saturn and Uranus transits typically lead to market going down, and also problems for structures being like actual like walls, buildings, structures, but also like structures meaning a government entity or corporate structure where companies go through like basically they have to cut losses and they may replace leadership, or there's some problems again involving like leaders at again high levels, high places, and basically a turbulent time. And then in addition to that, we will have fairly precise transits of Uranus, especially to the nodes. And whenever we have these slow-moving planets basically forming either conjunction, opposition, and square to the nodes, is usually the time where you see impactful events that basically create a lot of consequences for large groups of people, are televised, or somehow the news spread literally, to large number of people, and or you have things that affect large groups of people. Either they are aware of it, it's happening because it's all over the news, or literally the entire like country, for example, is affected by something like that. So I looked just back down a few decades at what had happened previously when we had Uranus in conjunction to one of the moon nodes, and whether or not Mars was there, I didn't particularly check for that. There was one instance in 1976, and I'll touch on that when we did have Mars there as well, just like what we will have coming up this July, August. And typical expectations of events at this time could be, again, major accidents, not just your sort of small events where somebody falls off the bike, but major accidents like a plane crash, for example, problems with like an energy company, power plant, literally things kind of like blowing up, many of the transformers, major industrial accident, major storms that cut off power to, again, large groups of people, sudden like attacks, and again, maybe like some war type events, but involving, again, most likely airplanes, aircraft, something that's, again, airborne, that's an attack, for example, or some surprising, shocking news that, again, involve like an IT company, for example, or having to do with like an explosion or accident involving like a large car pileup, but again, something that is preceded by or during the accident. What we have is like an explosion or fire, and with Mars, of course, that is quite a possibility. And or, of course, with Uranus there, it may have to do with things like really strong winds, so like a really major storm, for example. Of course, in the US, this is the time where major hurricanes can form. So if indeed there's a hurricane at this time, it may be quite a bit more significant than usual and with a lot more impact. So some of the, oh yeah, and also just something to mention before I get into specific examples is that at the same time, this particular triple conjunction of Mars, Uranus, and Moon Node will be forming an exact opposition to Venus in the horoscope of China, which of course Venus has to do with things like money, finance. It happens to be in Scorpio in the horoscope of China, which that also has to do with things like debt, rates, loans. So definitely, in addition to this just generally difficult time globally, prone to major storms, accidents, and just various tribulations, and even some warlike activities, there may also be upsets for China specifically that are related to finance, rates, loans, bankruptcies, and at least at the very minimum, sudden loss of value of maybe a currency or sudden loss of value of some corporation. So definitely things that are shocking, unexpected with either their timing, how quickly something unfolds, something that literally is announced overnight, and also, again, with moon nodes being there, more significant than normal in terms of it affecting larger groups of people. So some of the previous events of note, what we had in the past, let's see, back in December 2014 and January 2015, we had Uranus conjuncting South Node in Aries. Some of the events that occurred at the time, there was an Indonesia Air Asia Flight 8501. Then there was a January 2015 North American blizzard that happened to be exceptionally powerful and severe. There was also a major pileup that involved, I think it's also in North America somewhere, in Michigan. It was 193 cars, and apparently one of the trucks there had like 40,000 pounds of fireworks, and it also exploded. And on my blog I linked to like a Twitter account that showed that picture, I guess, from that explosion. Pretty crazy. And basically, and that was another incident at a different year that also, and I just will get into that, also involved like a really major car pileup with, again, fire, super hot fire and explosion. So let's see, also that same year, 2015 January, over 2,000 people were killed in Nigeria after the Boko Haram militants razed, I guess, one of the towns there, town of Baga. There was also in France a terrorist attack on the Charlie Hebdo newspaper. Then let's see, there were also really major massive floods in Mozambique and Malawi, where over 70,000 people were left homeless, and there were some plane crashes and minor, but again, something that's just illustrative of what type of events might happen in Washington, D.C. in U.S. There was a some sort of a situation in the metro where cars were filling with smoke, and one person died and dozens were hurt. And again, this is what you have. It's like transportation. Things suddenly happen, may happen in the tunnel, and or involve multiple, like a vehicle piling up, and smoke, electric malfunction. Then another time when we had, this time Uranus was conjuncting North Node in Pisces, and that was in March, April of 2007. And that's where there was another similar situation in Australia. There was this what's called Burnley Tunnel catastrophe, where again there was some trucks being hit by some cars, I guess, switching lanes incorrectly, where they weren't looking what they were at what they were doing. And there were some massive explosions, and the fire started where the heat reached over 1,000 Celsius, where literally the pictures, as you can see, and I put links on at my blog that you can link to all of these events that I'm citing, where literally like one of the trucks was just completely melted due to just how severe the fire was. Also, again, the same exact time, there was like a Blue Angels crash in South Carolina in the US. There was a massive 8.1 earthquake in Solomon Islands, and also in the Texas city, the BP America refinery, there was a massive explosion, which is another representation, like a major, yet again, explosion, fire, something that's massive and occurs suddenly. Also, at the same time, there was a spring or April nor'easter in 2007, and that also just involved super heavy winds, power outages, and 264 millions in damages, in 2007 dollars. Then in 1999, April, May of that year, we had Uranus conjuncting South Node in Aquarius, and there was a really massive tornado called Bridge Creek Moore tornado, and it was super large and super powerful. It was, I guess, the ranked F5, which I think is like a highest level. Oh yeah, in fact, it says here, and my source is Wikipedia, but I'm sure there are other sources as well. Basically, it's considered apparently the strongest ever tornado recorded in the metropolitan area, and that brought about 1 million in damages in, I guess, $1999, or like 1.6 million, or rather 1.6 billion dollars in damages in like 2000 something value of US dollar as of whatever that entry in Wikipedia was made. But basically, super massively damaging event, high strong winds, and again, my concern is, of course, in the US, this is the time where this will be coming up in 2022, is hurricane season, right? Sort of very prone to that, to tornadoes and hurricanes in general. So again, further in the same time, April, May of 1999, there was a Turkish Airlines flight 5904 had crashed. There was also a in Guinea-Bissau, I guess their president was ousted in military coup. There was also event of significance in Kosovo War, where at the time of the Federal Republic of Yugoslavia, 3 Chinese citizens were killed and 20 wounded when a NATO aircraft bombed Chinese embassy in Belgrade. Again, that's what I'm talking about, something damaging, again, from either high-speed winds that bring damages, or a little an aircraft or a drone or rockets or something that's coming from the air that is, again, happens fast and causes a lot of damage at the same time. Some going back yet, and again, some years in November of 1991, we had Uranus conjuncting North Node in Capricorn at that time, and at the time, there was what's called a perfect storm, I guess, again, in the US, that came up, it absorbed one of the hurricanes, evolved into another unnamed hurricane, and also was a massive storm that caused about $200 million in damage, again, in 1991 US dollars. At the same time, in the Philippines, they've experienced Tropical Storm Thelma, which apparently is one of the deadliest cyclones in Philippine history that killed over 5,000 people. And also, yet again, in Yugoslavia, there was what's called, I guess, the end of the battle of what they call Battle of Vukovar, where apparently it was like 87-day siege. It started actually in August of that year, but it ended in November. And as that city fell, hundreds of soldiers and civilians were massacred, and also over 20,000 inhabitants were expelled. Let's see, and going back yet again a few years, in 1984, January, February of this year, we had Uranus conjuncting South Node in Sagittarius, and the event that happened there was a major industrial oil spill and the fire near Villa Parisi, and I think it was in Brazil, if I'm not mistaken, and 700,000 liters of gas were released, over 1,000 homes destroyed, and over 500 people were killed. So really major industrial disaster. Yet again, this sudden explosion and massive fire is the theme here. There was also a massive severe tropical storm called Domoina, I guess, and it was in South Africa, and it's called 100-year floods, so really massive floods, and record rainfall in Swaziland. let's see. And going back to then 1976, and that's the last date that I looked at. However, what's significant about October of 1976 is that at that time, that transit was the most similar to what will be occurring yet again this summer. Specifically, Mars was conjuncting North Node and Uranus in Scorpio. This time it will be in the opposite sign in Taurus, but because again, as you can imagine, they're not like opposite because we're not living in like two-dimensional sort of plane. They're really kind of related. Those Taurus and Scorpio are kind of related to each other, so it's going to be both similar in terms of it being on the same axis, but also the same three sort of components, the same three energies yet again will be combining in July and August of this year, just like it was in October of 1976. So what happened then? One, there was this Cubana de Aviación Flight 455 that was brought down by a terrorist bomb attack, and the crash apparently killed the entire Cuban national fencing team, which I thought was obviously, besides it being just tragic and scary as an event, but also the fact that Mars being present, of course, rules things like explosions, fires, and just not violence, but like just risky activities. But the fact that also rules sports, and it was the entire fencing team, which again, fencing has to do with obviously using these sharp objects for fighting, and then to get fighting, racing, any kind of risky high speed, like, I don't know, maybe jumping out of like airplane or something like that, was it skydiving? Those would also be strongly associated with Mars. So certainly it is interesting that when Mars was present, it was not only just an airplane, dangerous situation involving an airplane, of course an explosion, an attack. However, it also specifically involved a fencing team, and then the entire fencing team had perished. So let's see, so that was one. And another also significant event that occurred in October of 1976 was in Thailand, and it's known, I guess, as the October 6, 1976 massacre, where security forces or police attacked about 2,000 student protesters that gathered in some university there, and basically then I guess civilians, I think, joined them, and some people were lynched. Basically a really major kind of difficult, tragic event yet again. And so those are some of the I'm not saying that the exact same situations will necessarily occur in July and August of this year. And again, this might be the strongest right around from the 25th of July through the 13th of August, and especially right around August 1st. However, events that will likely be sudden, difficult, dangerous, and involve perhaps either really bad weather with power outages. And again, for China specifically, it may affect somehow their either banks or financial institutions, or even just concerns about, again, sudden bankruptcies may come up, and definitely something that will be either really widely shown all over the news and the media, and or it will involve large groups of people. So if it's like a storm, it may be covering larger than usual area. So definitely, if you have plans to visit areas that are prone to such events, or perhaps you're thinking of flying somewhere, this might not be the best time of the year to do so. So just kind of heads up on that. And definitely for the markets, of course, with these kind of constellations, especially with Saturn being square to Uranus at the same time, and again, Venus being affected in the chart of China, definitely expect there being turbulations, and chances are there may be also a massive down market event around those same dates. So something to also be aware of. So with that, I'm going to wrap this up, and I hope you enjoyed this and found this informative, and come back and check me out next time. Until then, have a fantastic week. Bye.